What's going on, everybody? This is the Blockchain Backer, bringing you the latest cryptocurrency news and analysis. Today, we're going to be talking about the XRP price chart, coming off of the big news announcement yesterday that the SEC is dropping their appeal against Ripple, effectively ending this case and making the nightmare come to an end after a tough 4+ year battle against the SEC. The price of XRP popped on the news, but has since stalled out. Of course, for years, many people thought that once that news came out, it would pump their bags to oblivion. But as we continue to see with news catalysts, price tends to kind of stall after the news event. And we even saw that back in 2023 when XRP was deemed not a security and got relisted back on all exchanges. The good news is price is up. But the reality is, in order to see expansionary moves happen in the market that are sustainable and not news-driven, we typically have to have the cooperation of the whole market, including Bitcoin and macro, such as the Russell 2000. Now, my thoughts are we are seeing a rotational top happen in the equity market, and that we will eventually see the Russell go push for that high. And suffice it to say, I think that XRP is waiting for that as well, along with the Bitcoin price chart. But I do come here with some good news. Outside of those who were probably hoping that the prices would just go to the absolute moon the day that news came out. Reality is, let's think about it for a second here. We kind of all knew it was coming. We've seen all the things that have happened in here. I'm sure there were many people who knew ahead of time, where Brad had already recorded that video. He was going on stage for a conference to make his announcement. Many people on the inside already knew about this. Even Eleanor Tourette had already gotten the scoop on it that it was coming to a conclusion. And frankly, that may be why the XRP price chart has held up so strong compared to the rest of the market. Many of you have probably seen John Bollinger, the creator of Bollinger Bands, post over there on X saying of all the major crypto vehicles, Ripple resisted the recent singing of the siren song best. Will it become the new leader? XRP USD. It has been very, very strong. Still up 400% from just back 3 months ago. And so while maybe you didn't get your pump to the moon on the news that got released, I'm going to present the case on why I still think it's coming. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about the Russell 2000, a rotational top happening in the equity market, and how that's going to be the cause, which I do think that will be the cause, and that has to happen. Without that, we get nothing. But we're going to take a look throughout the cryptocurrency market and corrective structures that have happened here in the market, and why I do believe that things will turn their way around, and we're going to see that one last wave, like I keep talking about on the Russell 2000, one last wave. Similarly to how you got that one last wave over there in Bitcoin that sets a new high, but that becomes the end. And that type of moment is what gives that big last push, the big monster move that ultimately does lead us into a bear market, but is that last hurrah that actually gets this Bitcoin dominance to crash down here from this 702 retracement and send the excitement throughout the market. Now, of course, you may wonder why this line is sitting here. Really, this has been the bottom of our range here for the last 4 months, but it's also the peak that was set back there in April of 2021. Over the last 2 weeks, I've made videos showing how XRP has done really an actual standard corrective structure in here, however, just being much stronger. And the way to imagine it is like this is Bitcoin back in April and May of 2021, and then this is Bitcoin back in November of 2021. That this asset in particular has just been much stronger than the rest of the market, whereas the rest of the market has been corrective ever since the peak back over in here in early December, such as with Cardano, which I've overlaid here on the chart. Notice that these peaks do not exceed what happened back in December, and that is also true for Total 3, peaking in December, not being exceeded here in January, and the same goes for Total 2 over here, where we're not able to exceed the peak over here in December. And that if we looked at it through the manner of what a correction looks like, or even a mid-cycle correction, or if you considered this to be an alt season, which there's like an argument here that a part of the market experienced an alt season, to envision what that looked like for things like XRP back in 2017 versus Cardano in current times, it's like we are very deep into it. We've already ABC'd. Now we're just in this sideways chop accumulation, waiting for that last hurrah and the ending phase of markets that give like the blow off top. Now, what's interesting about 2021 and 2017 is there just tends to be some type of leaders that emerge. Back in 2017, one of those was Coin. Back in 2021, it was Solana. Here in 2024 and 2025, it really seems like it's been SWI. And for those who recall what it was like back in August of last year when SWI is at 60 cents, I was making this argument in here saying, this is a lot like Solana, this is a lot like Coin. This is how these bottoms can come in here. And price did ultimately 10x just during this move that happened right in here from August till December. But with all the talk out there of recession and everything is going to crash, well, then you would think this would be exhibiting what peaks of like Solana looked like, peaks of like what Coin looked like. But if you recall, even on Solana, we were showing how we could do this and then go into that bigger wave. Now, if you're here for XRP content, we're going to circle back to that, but I have to show you this. So to see a big move happen like this for SWI, we would have to be arguing that we're essentially doing that this is wave 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What you'll likely hear argued is, no, we can't do that because we can't cross through the plane of wave 1 when we create this fourth wave. First of all, that rule is very vague. You can, but my argument also is the market caps are the things that do matter. I don't care what other people say. The market caps matter. The peak from back in May and in April is way down here at like $2.5 billion. So you can see we've only come down to $6 billion. I can swap us to the market cap over here. You could see that's way down here. That all your big breaks happen in here, and price is effectively pulled back down into these levels. So if we essentially played with this idea that this is wave 4, then it implies there's wave 5. Well, we're implying that here when we're talking about macro, that there's one more wave to happen over here in macro as there's like a rotating top happening in the market. We're also implying there's one more move happening over here on charts like Cardano and XRP. But what we should probably see is that there's some type of similarities happening in here, that we're forming some type of bottom at this point, that we should see some type of structural resemblance here of this fourth wave, that it's coming to a conclusion. Now, the first things I notice in here that are different from the fifth wave compared to the third wave is how the peaks come in. Notice in the blow off top, it ends with 5 waves that get excessive and then it crashes. However, when wave 3 is completed, it's more of a rolling ending to wave 3. Notice the rolling ending happening here to wave 3 on SWI. Then a bigger fall happens. Bounces on supports, ultimately to capitulate. Noticing strength indicators in here, it also looks familiar. We could see that the MACD at this point is where we hit our lowest point here on the MACD. Then as this low is set, the MACD is not quite as weak. Notice that over here as well. This is that first fall happening here. That's the low point for the MACD, followed by the true bottom, which has a higher point here on the MACD. Whereas on the relative strength index, we can see that it goes slightly lower, and on the relative strength index, it goes slightly lower. Notice that the stochastic RSI has already bottomed out. As we're here on the 5-day time frame now. And on the 5-day time frame, we could see we're just starting to cross through the plane for the MACD averages, which we're also doing here. I'll leave those arrows in the same spot as we move down to the 3-day time frame now. And we can just see how it's effectively getting weaker from the sell pressure side, that sellers are running out of juice. And so what we're seeing here is that this thing has already capitulated after having a rolling top of wave 3 to then hit its bottom already. And it's essentially arguing you're probably somewhere right along there. And you're probably thinking, hey man, we've deviated pretty far from XRP over here. But remember what we were just talking about with Cardano, how it's already kind of been in this corrective structure, that while XRP has been much stronger, we've already seen like these corrections show up in here. And what I'm showing here is like we can see these things have really already done their full corrections, whether we're looking at Cardano or we're looking at SWI. But just saying that wouldn't be good enough for this video. The argument that's being presented here between SWI and between Coin is that there is a parallel to this moment, and that there still is the fifth wave, the blow-off wave to come here in the market. Now, if you've followed my channel for the last couple of weeks or days, we've drawn the parallel here that this whole move here on XRP, once again, was also like that correction from back in 2017. Like we just showed over there on Cardano, that it's like you've been down here during all of this because XRP has been much stronger, whereas we do see it over here in the market that this is where the other assets have already been, as if they've already gotten down in here during this moment. And so we've been arguing in here that we're kind of like right there, and arguing over here on SWE that right here, you're kind of like being right there. That these are various corrective structures that are happening in the market, where XRP has been more like these things that we've been talking about in here, where it's just been much stronger. But you have Cardano doing your standard ABC stuff, and then you have SWE doing things that look like wave 4s before wave 5s. But what do all of these imply? This corrective structure implies a 5th wave. This corrective structure implies a 5th wave. And these corrective structures imply a 5th wave. And so if our parallel is to say this corrective structure here for Cardano is mimicking being in this moment in here, do you think there's going to be confluence happening here between these on what we're looking at to get a wave 5? Will there be confluence to that moment of September of 2017? Well, believe it or not, it is actually exactly where we were in September of 2017. I'll switch it to a smaller time frame so you can see that this ABC correction here on XRP lands you in this moment right in here, which is right there. It's a perfect match. That SWE is corroborating Cardano, which is corroborating XRP, which is corroborating macro markets to say that there is one last push. And that when that comes, that is the grand finale of the market. It's the true broad-based alt season. Many coins, likely at least 80% of them, are only going to do retraces and not set new all-time highs, but they'll probably see the highest prices that they've seen in years. But what I wanted to show you is that all the things we've been talking about, these things and these structures, and people being like, why is XRP so strong? Or why is this one particular asset so weak? And what we can see is they're doing various different corrective structures here throughout the market, but they're all symbolic and similar to what we actually did see there in 2017, where some were doing things like this, like for XRP, whereas others were doing like this for Coin, which in this current time is like what we're seeing for Cardano. And that in this, you can see it, this phase, which we're talking about over here, like XRP, back in here, is exactly what XRP did during that time when these peaks were set, like here for SWE in 2024 and 2025, and like for XRP in 2017. There becomes the pop here that holds the low, the pop here that holds the low, whereas Coin capitulates and SWE capitulates. So a lot of these corrections are looking different for different assets. Some of them are having these types of corrective structures, where others are having like the XRP style corrections. And XRP is just over here being super strong, holding everything. And so while people, of course, were thinking they could read the news and front run the news with everybody else who front ran the news, typically news events don't give you enough to catapult markets into an actual expansion. And we didn't see that in 2024, that this was caused by a news event. This was caused by an expansion. But I wanted to show you throughout the whole market that we are setting up very similarly in corrective structures of what happens before we do go into another expansion, which is also corroborated with macro markets. The thing I do want to point to, though, is that it's like being here, which doesn't mean it's going to happen tomorrow or today on a news pump. There's probably still some more negativity in the market, but you can clearly see we're likely much closer than we have been in a long time. That last move that we saw back on March 10th for anything that set new lows was likely the capitulation low. You can see in this example, it does revisit the low again. Very possible, frankly, probable. It'll happen again. But one thing we will look for very closely is to see evidence of the breadth opening in that moment. And I want you to remember that if we get this and then we start actually shifting, that we should see the breadth open in the market. Because what you don't want to see is you don't want to see this thing go back into a retracement. Because if it just goes back into a retracement, then breadth will not open. So we're going to look for evidence of it happening right here. But I feel so confident in it that I'm not even going to worry about this. We are mimicking what happens at the end of wave 4 down here, coming off of this rolling top here for the end of wave 3, and that the corrections in Cardano and XRP corroborated as well, and that we are much more mirroring a wave 4 consolidation rather than a wave 5 crash, which is the same for SWE, for Coin, and for Cardano. And that I do believe we're finishing this up over here. It's going to take a little while. People always want to know time, how long, when, moon. It's the only thing anybody ever cares about. I don't know. I can just show you things on charts and how long they take. If this thing took 64 days to get there, and if this thing took 87 days to get there, well, it took another 50 days at that point for that bottom to get marked and for it to start, which is about 60% of the time of how long it took to fall. An equivalent of that would be 38 days from that moment in there. So just if you moved at that velocity, it tells you that it's done bottoming out mid-April. You're going to see people throwing their papers in the air. Ah, come on! Hey, man, it is what it is. I have no way to know if that's what's going to end up happening or how long that's going to take. I can just show you ratios, and those are the ratios. But you have to understand, that's why you guys also get gravitated towards clickbait videos of we're about to moon tomorrow $10,000 XRP, because that's what you want more than anything. I'm just going to try to show it to you the best I can in the most realistic manner that I can. And I'm trying to paint that in the most neutral way possible. But I do believe, looking throughout the market in various corrections that are happening everywhere and how strong XRP has held up, unlike something that would be crashing, the corrective structures happening in Cardano, the corrective structures happening in SWI, all of this mimics what is happening in a wave 4 corrective structure that ultimately leads to a fifth wave blow off top that ends the market. And that does corroborate the idea that there actually is that same thing happening in the stock market, that we're seeing mega caps topping out and that there will be this breadth opening happening in there. It would be the last run that we would see for this cycle. So, you know, you had the big push back there in March of 2024. You had the big push there in November and December of 2024. And then this would be like the last one, the last hurrah. Then we enter into years of just nothing burger. And I always joke about how to paint that. Do I paint that as most epic rally inbound, or do I paint it as, you know, hey, the end of the world is coming pretty soon? You know, tough way to do it. But those are the things that I see. I hope you found it interesting. It's what I am absolutely excited about. But I also know this means that if in the event that we get that, I'm going to be taking tons of action on my portfolio at that time. But for those who were hoping that they were front running because they had inside information that it was going to end, well, other people had inside information before you. And we haven't really ever noticed that any type of pump is sustainable on any type of news catalyst whatsoever. And the things that we do need is to see broad market rallies happening throughout there. And what I wanted to do was paint the picture of the entire market to say, hey, look, yeah, this pump's probably not going to give you anything life-changing out of it. But it's over, man. The case is over. It's 4+ years of dealing with that nonsense. It's over. Last night's the first night of sleep. Got to go to bed without it being an issue. It sets the stage for when things do return to the market. Where will retail flock to? My best guess, they're gonna flock here. And I wanted to show you a lot of the charts and the structures and corroborating evidence to suggest that this is the completion of a wave 4 correction that will lead to one last big fat rally. I think XRP will do fantastic in it. I think everything will have big moves during that moment. But we know that's the necessary ingredient for sustained rallies rather than news events. And so I hope you enjoyed seeing that. And I hope you found it interesting, because I certainly find it interesting. And I think 2025 is our year. 2024 is great. Like I showed, we're up 400%. You know how much Bitcoin is up? 20. So they're mad. But I'm not going to take shots at them. It's a great time to be an XRP holder. Prices have sustained themselves. We got the news we're looking for. It's over, guys. That nightmare has come to a conclusion. It's time to move on to the next phase of our book being written. But that's going to be it for this one. You guys could check out my newsletter over here where we talk a lot about the rotational top. It's available over here at blockchainbacker.substack.com. It comes with a 30-minute audio recording, and you get access to all the past newsletters as well. You can check out bcbacker.com for over 40 videos and 11 hours of content teaching you how to set up your own charts and indicators within TradingView and CoinTrader Pro. There are links in the descriptions of each of my videos to the newsletter at blockchainbacker.substack.com and to bcbacker.com. Otherwise, have a wonderful day, and congrats, everybody. It's over. But all right, that's it. Thank you so much for watching. If you could, please like this video and give it a thumbs up. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe and hit the notification bell so you can be notified of when I create new content and when I go live. As always, this is not investment advice, and I am not a financial advisor. But if you ever need a pick-me-up or a little bit of reassurance, just remember that the blockchain backers got your back. Have a good one.